Good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for being here. It's really an honor to be here this evening. My name is Alan McGowan. I am the chair of Environmental Studies program here at the New School, one of the 4 co-sponsors of this event. On behalf of my fellow chairs, Jürgen von Maas, Jonathan Bach, and Emily Moss, a hearty welcome. Tonight is a very special event with very special people, as you well know. That's why you're here. There are too many people to thank. It always takes a bit of time to put something like this together. Brandon Fisher, Pam Tillis, our colleagues at the New Press, Julie McCarroll, who are the people who initiated this event, and many more. Since this is a relatively small audience, we are going to dispense with the cards that you were given and ask people to come to the microphones to ask questions that makes it a little bit more intimate. But we are being live streamed, so you people, welcome, who are looking at us on a computer screen. You have a little chat box in the bottom, and you will please type in your questions so that we can bring them up and ask them of the speakers. Well, I'm told that it's the job of a moderator to be moderate, so let me proceed to one introduction. Tim Marshall, the provost of the New School, former dean of Parsons, and I will tell you from personal experience, a passionate believer in the interdisciplinary programs of which we are one representative. It's a great pleasure to introduce him. Tim?
Thank you, Alan. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening for this important event, and to everyone online as well. And thank you for coming out in this trying weather. It's not easy at this time of year. And of course, last week's storm and the storm we just had now does bring into high relief the fragility of our environment and the topics that we're addressing this evening. And it creates a special relevance for this evening's program, as does almost the complete avoidance of climate change in the presidential race until the acceptance speech. This program is co-sponsored, as Alan said, by several of our interdisciplinary programs here at the New School: the Environmental Studies program, the Urban Studies program, the Urban Design program, and the Global Studies program. Tonight's program does bring together 2 important voices: Helen Caldicott, who has worked tirelessly for a safe, sustainable, nuclear-free planet, and the renowned journalist Bob Herbert. For more than 35 years, Helen Caldicott has been educating the public and policymakers about the medical hazards of nuclear weapons and the necessary remedy of citizen participation. Many of you may not know that she also taught a course here at the New School in the mid-90s that is so topical I thought I'd quickly read a bit of the course description here. It was entitled Media, Global Politics and the Environment, and this is how it was described. There is no denying that the world's diverse peoples have become interconnected by a global communication network. What is not so obvious is that this vast network, which influences the thoughts and lifestyles of billions of people, is dominated by a few transnational corporations. And since levels of consumption generated by advertising in both developed and developing nations are degrading the world's ecosystems, and since there is evidence that governments are unduly influenced by the media conglomerates, which poses a grave threat to democracy, the roles of these corporations have a direct bearing on the fate of the Earth itself. End of description. Helen Caldicott was co-founder of the Nobel Prize-winning Physicians for Social Responsibility, and in 2002, she founded the Nuclear Policy Research Institute, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank. She has received many prizes and awards for her work, including the Lannan Foundation Prize for Cultural Freedom and the Gandhi Peace Prize. The Smithsonian Institution named her to its list of the most influential women of the 20th century. She is author of numerous books, including Nuclear Power is Not the Answer and Loving This Planet, both published by the New Press. And Loving the Planet is down here at the desk. Journalist Bob Herbert is a distinguished senior fellow with Demos and a contributing editor at the American Prospect magazine. From 1993 to 2011, he was the op-ed columnist for the New York Times, writing a twice-weekly column about politics, urban affairs, and social trends. Mr. Herbert's numerous awards include the American Society for Newspaper Editors Award, the David Nyan Prize from the Shorenstein Center at Harvard University, the Meyer Berger Award, and the Ridenour Courage Prize for his, quote, fearless articulation of unpopular truths. It's my great pleasure now to turn the program over to Helen and Bob. Please come on. Thank you.
Good evening. How are you? Thank you for coming. There's a great deal of weirdness going on when you have a hurricane one week and a snowstorm the next. So Helen is here to tell us why that sort of thing is happening. Getting a little feedback on this microphone, I think. But try it this way. No?
It's a bit better.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. You can hear me? Good. All right. So the big news, we're going to talk a great deal about the environment, of course. Loving This Planet. Congratulations on the book, a collection of interviews, and it's terrific. But before we get to the environment, we're going to talk about the big news in the States, and that's the election, the re-election of Barack Obama. And I suspect that you were pleased with the outcome, but tell us a little bit about your reaction.
Well, I was extremely disturbed that Romney might win, and of his 24 advisors, 17 came from the Bush administration, including John Bolton and Wolfowitz, and really, really dangerous people. And it became clear during the election that he was really hostage to these people and that he would probably bomb Iran. And Physicians for Social Responsibility did a study to show that if 2 nuclear weapons were dropped on the 2 uranium enrichment facilities in Nahan and Isfahan, the resultant fallout could kill 2.6 million people. So I was pretty worried about that. Also, it would destabilize the Middle East and God knows what, and could lead to a nuclear war between Russia and America, who still target each other with thousands of nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. And any such anxiety-provoking situation in the world, like 9/11, they went to the highest state of nuclear alert, or bombing Iran, could blow us all up and create the global gas oven. So I was pretty concerned that if he won, I didn't know what I thought I didn't really want to live anymore. That's how I felt. Anyway, he didn't win. Obama, who I was really in love with at the last campaign, has really let us down a long way. I'm just hoping now that because he's been re-elected, he'll have the guts to take on the powers that be and do the right thing. I mean, if he appointed Krugman or Stiglitz as his financial advisors, that would be very good. So we'll just have to wait and see, but I just hope he realizes that the fate of the earth depends upon America, and I don't think most Americans understand that, but we all understand it living outside America.
When you say we all living outside of America, give us a sense, in a general way, of how we're perceived. I mean, I know a lot about what Americans think about what's going on.
Exceptionalism, that
left
you're the
and
greatest
right.
country on earth, yeah.
But give us a take from the outside.
It's funny because
what do we look like?
When I talked to an American audience, I said, "You're not the greatest country on earth. You know, what about Australia? We've got kangaroos." And everyone laughs. Look, you're seen with ambivalence. You're very aggressive. You've got military bases in every country of the world. You've got no right to be in any other country of the world except your own, and that really upsets a lot of people, Your militarism is profound.
Are we generally perceived as an empire?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I mean, Australia's the 51st state. We're now hosting your Marines in Darwin. Big war games are going on now in Queensland. We've got 34 bases, all of which are targets in the event of nuclear war. We've got pathetic politicians who just are sycophantal to the United States. And you're pretty tough. You know, you push people around. You supported Suharto, yeah, who killed an awful lot of his people.
We've supported
You've
a lot.
supported a lot of killers.
A lot of bad guys. So
So that's one. Number two, You know, your blasted multinational companies are everywhere. McDonald's and KFC, they even want to bring them into my little fishing village. In Australia, we hate that. And also the way you've mobilised advertising so that we all covet our neighbours' goods, and you're brilliant at advertising. You use sex to sell things, and if you just buy this thing, you'll be happy and live sexually happily till you die, sort of stuff. And that's all over our television, and we resent that. And yet, we're taken in by it, and we buy the stuff, which is now all made in China, which is why, after you sign the global trade agreement, all your jobs have been carted off to China. I was just in a shop now in the village. Great clothes. Everything's made in China, you know. And then everyone's screaming, why don't we have jobs? Well, you don't have jobs. The only jobs you have are to produce weapons to kill people. And now because Obama and the Congress have to cut down the budget for the military, that's Lockheed Martin and Boeing, what are they going to do? Oh, they're going to fix it. Business section, New York Times today, they're going to sell weapons abroad. So everyone can have weapons and kill people.
One final question on us before we get to the environment, which encompasses everyone. We had a conversation some time ago, and we were talking about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I do find it upsetting. I mean, people in the United States don't even talk about peace anymore. It's not an issue that comes up. We've been in a state of war for so long. But I told you that I was opposed to the war in Iraq, but that I had supported our invasion initially in Afghanistan. I think that we've been there much too long. There's no reason to have been in Afghanistan more than a decade after September 11th. But you were taken aback, to put it mildly.
I was.
Tell me why.
From someone so liberal as you, I was quite taken aback. Look, I was here on 9/11. I'd just flown in from Australia to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, to speak to a whole lot of university students. And I got up the next morning and watched the planes fly in. And I thought, what am I going to say to these students tonight? And it was a very big Christian campus, and I was walking across the campus to have a swim, and one woman said, do you believe in Jesus? And I said, I'm a pantheist. And she said, you'll go to hell, as if she slapped me in the face psychologically. And I thought, this is a creepy place. So I thought, what am I going to do? You know, all these Christians. So I got out the Bible and I read Luke, what Jesus said, love thine enemies and do good to those who hate you. So when the students filed in, ashen white, that's what I read to them. And I said, that's what Jesus preached. And that's what we must do. And we must find out who and why they did it, but don't go out and kill a whole lot of people with vengeance. Well, a few days later I got in a Greyhound bus and the whole country was swathed in flags, and it was God bless America, and I thought, oh God, why should God bless America anyway? I mean, why are you so good? Anyway, and I was really scared that America would go for vengeance, and she did. And this country is the most powerful militarily in the world and can blow up the world. And we've got to stop killing people, Bob.
I'm going
to write a book called Why Men Kill.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that what's been going on is insane. You know, the bases that you talked about all over the world, the drone warfare where many innocent people get killed, and even the allegedly guilty people, you know, there's no oversight or whatever, so you don't know whether they're actually guilty or not, and they have no recourse. So I agree with you, the killing is insane. But my final question on that is, did you not think that we had a right to go into Afghanistan chasing al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden?
Oh, you had no right to do that. You're pretty smart. Let's be frank. You know, they finally got, what's his name? Bin Laden.
Yeah.
Do you know that the day after 9/11, the only planes in the air were the planes flying out the Bin Laden family, flying them out? Duh. What connection did George Bush have with the Bin Ladens? The full story on 9/11 has not yet been told. I don't want to get into that. But
Just for the record, as a former
journalist.
sergeant in the army, I would have gone into Afghanistan.
I know, and
Yeah.
we disagree,
Yeah.
and it's nice when
But
we
we
disagree
could
because
have,
the audience
we could
likes
have
it.
wound that conflict down very quickly.
Bob,
It-
who were you
you
going
know.
to kill? You didn't know who the guys were that went into the world. You had there were no connections with anyone in Afghanistan. You just went and killed blindly. Then you went into Iraq and you've killed 1 million people, half of whom are children. And you've used uranium weapons, and the congenital anomalies in Fallujah and Basra now are huge.
There is no disagreement between
It's
us
just
on Iraq. That was insanity.
Unbelievable.
Al Gore, if he had been, he was elected president, he just wasn't allowed to become president. But if he had become president, we would not have had that war in Iraq for sure. But Al is upset because in this presidential campaign that we've just gone through, there was, as you pointed out, no discussion of climate change, global warming, and that sort of thing. So let's start our discussion of the environment right there. The ice caps are melting. The oceans are rising. We've just been through the trauma of Hurricane Sandy. We almost lost New Orleans to Hurricane Katrina. We've had droughts. We've had terrible wildfires,
Fires.
all kinds of freakish events. I am really happy that global warming is a liberal hoax perpetrated by folks like yourself, because otherwise I would be frightened. Actually, I'm hearing that even some conservatives are beginning to think
But
there
Bob,
might be something to this global
I'm a
warming.
conservative
global
because
I know you
I'm
keep
for
saying
conserving life.
that. You keep.
I'm a doctor. I
you-
took the
you-
Hippocratic
you
Oath. I'm a
keep- You keep
conservative.
saying that.
Don't you believe me?
I tell people I am a liberal. I am a dyed-in-the-wool liberal. You are way to my left. Helen.
No, I'm a conservative.
But let's talk about global warming seriously.
Yeah.
Do we still have our heads in the sand on this issue, or do you think that we might be at a moment where something could be done?
I can't see that happening unless the people of New York rise up and lead this nation in a revolution.
Well then, I rest my case. See, she mentions revolution and gets applause. So
Well, we had a revolution in the 80s. When I first came in 78, every American I spoke to almost said it's better to be dead than red. And I said, what? Oh, we don't want to be communists. You know that? And I said, well, what about the pygmies in Africa? They'll be killed too. They said, oh, don't want to be communists either. And I thought, this is psychosis. So I started Physicians for Social Responsibility. We started dropping the bomb on Boston and New York and describing vaporization and burns and everyone dying. In 5 years with the Freeze campaign, 5 years with that campaign, 80% of Americans opposed the concept of nuclear war and supported a nuclear weapons freeze. That was the second American revolution.
all right, we're going to
And it was sagacious, peaceful, and Gandhian. And it was what Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. And we informed the American people about the medical dangers of nuclear war.
Actually, that's exactly the kind of revolution I'm in favor of.
I am
the
too.
Gandhian principles. And
That's what I'm talking about.
I know. But we're going to get to nukes in a few minutes. But if assume Americans were willing to listen to you seriously about climate change
Yeah.
and global warming, and our minds were open, what would you tell us? What do we need to be concerned about, and what do we need to be doing?
Well, I commissioned a study about 3 years ago called Carbon-Free, Nuclear-Free, written by a plasma physicist. And he was skeptical that you could survive on renewable energy. And he was amazed that, in fact, by 2050, but probably before then, America could be carbon-free and nuclear-free. You waste 28% of the electricity you use by leaving everything on. Nuclear power produces 20%. You don't need nuclear power. You are bathed by wind. There is enough wind west of the Mississippi to supply 3 times the amount of energy that this country currently uses. Why aren't solar panels on every single house and building in this country, including here? Just been in Austria where they have snow. All the houses are covered with solar panels. Why are you so backward? I'll tell you why. Because Exxon has spent hundreds of millions of dollars setting up think tanks in Washington mostly staffed by the same people, to convince people that there's doubt about global warming, the same technique that the tobacco companies did to say there's doubt about tobacco causing cancer. And it took us years to stop people smoking and to understand that smoking's lethal. So your oil companies own, and they get huge subsidies, they own the Congress. Your Congress is staffed by corporate prostitutes.
They own
Paid
the part
for
of the
by
Congress.
the oil companies, the nuclear companies, and now they want to drill. The Arctic ice is melting, so guess what? They're going to drill in the Arctic and make it worse.
They
Get
only,
more oil.
They only own the portion of the Congress that's not owned by the defense industry. So
It's not
you're
defense,
giving
it's
them-
offense.
Giving them
Don't
too
call
much,
it
too much
defense.
credit.
Call it the
But
War
seriously,
Department.
if, what happens, tell us what happens if we don't do anything to start dealing
Oh,
with
the world's
climate
doomed.
change.
I was just in Freiburg in Germany at a big conference, and the chairman of the International Energy Agency stood up and said, the way we're going, it's going to be 6 degrees centigrade hotter by the end of the century. Bob, that's antithetical to life.
Right.
And 3 degrees hotter by the middle of the century, and there's no evidence that anyone is doing a thing about it, including Australia. We've got a carbon tax, but don't worry, we're exporting so much coal to China, it doesn't matter. Huge amounts of coal. Oh, it's jobs. So this is a bad analogy, but it's not really. I'm sure Hitler said, well, we'll create jobs by building gas ovens. But jobs to mine coal is going to create the global gas oven, and we'll all be dead. Not just us, but 30 million other species.
Not the analogy I would have made.
I
but-
know it's not.
But Bill McKibben is in one of the interviews in your book, and he talked about a 129-degree day in Pakistan, and
Yeah.
that was somewhat scary. So those are the kinds of extremes that you're talking about?
We had a day like that in Australia on New Year's Day about 3 years ago. I thought I was going to die.
Then that 129 degrees was the
Yeah.
highest temperature ever recorded in
Well,
Asia.
it was near that anyway. The poor old cat didn't know what to do with itself. All of my plants were baked
cat.
like they'd been in the oven. I kept getting in the shower, but I mean, people die.
But what's life going to be like for us if we took up the challenge and we moved to renewables in a big way?
Yeah.
But you would not be able to have the kind of power
Yes, you would.
that we have now.
Oh, yes, you would.
I do think that we'd have to.
Yes,
I'd be
you
in
would.
favor of lifestyle change.
Darling,
But I think
know I
we'd have
mustn't
to
call
have.
you darling.
You can call me darling.
All right, darling. There are solar thermal plants now that store the energy overnight. You can use gas-fired plants too if the solar isn't working. You can transport all the wind energy from the western states, but you've got to upgrade your grid. And guess what, if you do this? With windmills, geothermal, cogeneration. I mean, your buildings now should be heated by geothermal energy. There's a building on Cape Cod, it's a Woods Hole Institute, totally heated and cooled. You just put pipes in the ground, and the ground is underneath the same temperature the whole year. So you heat and cool your house or huge building with geothermal energy. Can you imagine the number of jobs that would be created if America had the initiative and drive and courage to get away from those evil people who control the Congress and put solar panels on every building, solar-powered cars with solar panels on every parking lot, not hybrid, solar-powered cars, charge the car up during the day, power the house up at night, windmills everywhere, and wind generators taking the wind on new transmission lines. Your GDP would go up to glory. It would be a new FDR New Deal. And you would lead the world towards sanity and survival. And don't tell me you haven't got the initiative and courage to do that, because that's what made America great. Are you going to be great again or lead the world towards destruction?
In order to be great
because
again,
we follow you.
in order to be great again, we have to do what you said
Yeah.
we have to do.
Yeah.
There has to be a citizens movement, a
I need to
citizens
be
action
president.
movement to be. Well, for you to be president would require a citizens action
I know.
movement in this
No,
country.
we need-
and
yeah,
that
we
would
need
be a
s-
way of getting us
What about you? Oh, no.
back on track.
Well, you can
No.
be president.
And actually, I was up in Boston. Some fellow said, "I can raise some money. Would you like to run for Congress?" I said, "You out of your mind?"
No.
I have I'm smarter than that. Let's go on to one
Well,
of your...
that's the problem. We don't have smart people in the Congress. We have that Boner guy, or that's what George Bush called him, Boner. Boehner.
Leave it alone, Bob. We're going to go on to one of your favorite topics, nuclear power. To say that you are not a friend of the nuclear power industry is an understatement. So how did you become so interested, and this goes back a ways now,
Yeah.
how did you become so interested in nuclear power, in nuclear weapons, as you put it, in all things nuclear?
Yeah, well, when I was about 16, I read a book called On the Beach by Neville Shute.
I remember it well.
And I lived in Melbourne, which is where the book was set.
Right.
So there's a nuclear war in the Northern Hemisphere which could occur tonight. And we all survived, but no one else did because we're so far south. And gradually the radiation came down. And then the government dispensed cyanide capsules to kill the babies so they'd die suddenly, not with the lingering effects of vomiting and bloody diarrhea. And then eventually everyone died. And the beautiful, elegant streets of Melbourne were still there, with St George slaying the dragon outside the public library, and a blind was gently flapping in the breeze. And that was the end of life on Earth. I lost my virginity then. I never trusted anyone again. I read everything I could find about nuclear weapons. I then did first-year medicine, aged 17, learned about Muller, who irradiated Drosophila fruit fly and produced genetic abnormalities passed on generation to generation. So I understood what radiation did. Those two combined, plus America and Russia were testing in the atmosphere like there was no tomorrow, and there was fallout all over. Barry Commoner and others, Linus Pauling, would said children would get leukemia from this. It was so obvious to me as a medical student. I couldn't understand why these men were doing this. And I still can't understand it. And what they're doing is evil.
And so you decided...
Well, I didn't really decide anything.
You became committed to this issue in a way...
Well, I came to Boston when I was a young mother of 3 children under 3 and worked at Harvard. But I was radicalized because it was 66 to 69. Nixon was elected. Bobby was shot. I got up one morning and there he was lying bleeding to death. The Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King was shot. Anti-Vietnam War. And I saw a democracy in action. And I was radicalized. No, I wasn't radicalized. I saw a country with a democracy. And Australia was sound asleep. My mother had just died. I was going through a lot of grief. Then I read Germaine Greer, The Female Eunuch. And I thought, can I say that? Can I do that? Can I be that? And then I decided I knew with white-hot certainty what my truth was, and I would never again not speak my truth, ever. And I would stop flirting to get my way, although I like flirting.
So now that has to do with nuclear weapons. But a lot of my liberal friends say, all right, global warming is real. We have to do something about the way we manufacture and use energy in this country. And that means that we have to hold our nose and go for nuclear power. That is absolutely essential. What's your response to that?
So why are your liberal friends so ignorant?
I want you to tell us.
Well, that makes me cross. They have no right to be ignorant.
Where they're wrong.
Well, they haven't read my book, Nuclear Power is Not the Answer.
That's right.
And the first chapter deals with the fact that nuclear power produces a substantial amount of global warming gas. Because the reactor doesn't stand alone, like suddenly God went and made a reactor. You've got to mine millions of tons of uranium, huge amounts of fossil fuel, 2 huge coal-fired plants in Paducah, Kentucky, to enrich the uranium. 93% of the CFC gas emitted by you, because this nuclear industry's been grandfathered out of the Montreal Protocol, comes from Paducah, Kentucky. And it's 20,000 times more potent as a global warmer than CO2. Then you've got to build a reactor, huge amount of concrete. Then you have to decommission it. Then you have to store the radioactive waste for 1 million years. It produces a hell of a lot of CO2. So the nuclear industry lies. And I don't believe in this day and age when the Earth is in the intensive care unit, acutely clinically ill, that any scientist should lie. If we lie in medicine, we would be killing or damaging our patients and be deregistered. I don't believe in freedom of speech when it comes to Rush Limbaugh talking to an ignorant population with lies. It's too important now, Bob. We can't lie to our patients. Well, the earth is the patient now, and we're all physicians to the patient. And it's imperative that people, your liberal friends, not be so stupid and they educate themselves. It's so easy. They can get on the internet, it's all over the place. Don't they? And nuclear power with its waste will induce epidemics of cancer, leukemia, and random compulsory genetic engineering for the rest of time. My specialty is cystic fibrosis. All my patients die young. There are 2,600 such diseases. They'll all be increased in frequency by radioactive waste getting into the food for the rest of time. It's all over Europe now. Much of the food in Europe's radioactive. I don't eat European food, and now half Japan's contaminated. And we're exporting bombs by exporting reactors, because 250 kilos of plutonium made a year in a reactor, you need 5 kilos to make a bomb. And America wants to sell it to the United Arab Emirates, to Saudi Arabia. Oh, well, let's have lateral proliferation of nuclear weapons, which will destabilize the balance of terror and almost certainly induce a nuclear war.
Then on top of everything else, the nuclear plants, nuclear power is not cost effective. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It costs $12 to $15 billion now to build a reactor.
You cannot build these reactors without public subsidies.
It's all totally paid for by tax dollars. The insurance, everything's paid for. And then when the reactor's built, then the utilities come in and sell the electricity at $1 million a day. And that's why they want to keep them open long past their use-by date, when they become extremely dangerous, like Indian Point, and probably melt down. And you're lucky you didn't have a meltdown in this last hurricane.
The Michael Madsen is one of the people whose interview is in your book.
Yeah.
And this is, I found this really chilling.
Yeah.
He's a film director who made a documentary about nuclear waste. And he talked about a project in Finland that has been called the first post-human structure. And it's a nuclear waste storage facility that, once it's finished, cannot be disturbed for 100,000 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you tell us about that?
It's actually 1 million years according to your EPA.
According to America, it's 1 million years, but let's start with the 100,000.
What do you want me to say?
I want you to explain what this facility does and why we can't disturb it for 100,000 years.
Well, first of all, no container that you put high-level radioactive waste in will last longer than 100 years. Furthermore, I've just found out that radioactive waste causes a lot of helium to build up, and helium's a gas. And with 100 years, these containers will probably explode, releasing all their radioactive contents. Now, they want to put it in granite in Finland, but there are cracks in granite. And we're talking about ice ages and earthquakes. And so this stuff is going to obviously leak out of whatever container you put it in.
So what we're talking about is nuclear waste in this underground capsule, essentially, or bunker, however you want to describe it. And then that waste is radioactive, and as a result of the radioactive half-life, it would not be considered safe to disturb it for 100,000 years. Yeah. So you have to leave it there. But the point that this fellow makes is, even if this thing were to work the way it's supposed to work, even if you didn't get the cracks, which I agree with you, you could get cracks, you could have an ice age, you could have an earthquake, anything could happen. But even if none of that happened, civilization changes over the course of 100,000 years. So you could imagine what our species was like 100,000 years ago. So you could have a situation where no one understood what this stuff is that's buried down there, and they go down there. Let's check this out.
And it glows in the dark.
Let's find out. You know, so there's all kinds of potentials for catastrophe.
Well, the DO is employing.
In America, we don't know what to do with the nuclear waste.
No, I know you don't, but you keep making more.
I know.
Every day.
So
you're nuts.
What are the implications of that? That we have nuclear power plants, we're building up nuclear waste every day. The nuclear waste is on site right next to the plants, right?
Like at Fukushima.
I know, just like what happened.
If Building 4 collapses at Fukushima with an earthquake greater than 7, there's 10 times more radiation in that cooling pool than was released, where at Chernobyl? Help me. I can't remember.
don't know.
Chernobyl, I think. And if that goes down, they're going to have to evacuate Tokyo, 35 million people. And they can't get it fixed for at least 2 years. And the stuff will circulate around the northern hemisphere. The rods will burn, and you might have to evacuate.
Well,
I mean, we're talking about absolute medical catastrophe.
The corporate political elite in this country says we have to go to more nuclear plants.
Well, they're idiots.
If we're going to do something
I
about
am
global warming.
yeah, but I just told you it causes global warming. And are we going to kill people with an industry down the time track so we can turn our lights on? And people wake up generations now with their kids already getting cancer, the breast milk already radioactive, and they're saddled with all our radioactive waste. Who do we think we are, Bob?
I'm on your side. I think
know you are.
we need to shut down the plants that exist
So
now.
let's shake.
We'll shake on
Let's do it together.
that. I've written about this. I think nuclear power is
It's
another
insane.
form of insanity.
And you know why they started it? Because there was a psychologist in the Pentagon in the 50s who wrote an article saying we need to start the peaceful atom as
atoms for
a
peace.
kind of Trojan horse for the weapons industry. He actually wrote that. So it's really all about weapons, blowing up the world. That's what it's about. And it's the same, it's E equals MC squared. The power is enormous.
Oh, I know. I think most people don't know, but we saw what happened in Japan. We saw what happened in Chernobyl.
I'm going there next week. I have to wear goggles.
We saw what happened at 3 Mile Island. So we know that these disasters are going to occur.
And 1 million people already have died as a result of Chernobyl, according to the New York Academy of Science.
And I've written about plants in the U.S. that already have had...
And they go on and on about breast cancer, right? And people wear pink ribbons, and Obama wore a pink thing. And you don't wait till a patient presents themselves with breast cancer, because we usually can't cure it. Sometimes we can. What you do with an incurable disease is you prevent it. You don't foster an industry that is a cancer-causing industry. I mean, how many people have I helped to die of cancer? My father died of cancer in 3 weeks because he built 2 houses out of asbestos. He was 51.
My father died of cancer that was a result of smoking, and I completely agree
go.
with you. They did the same thing
Yeah.
with cigarettes.
How
the
old
big
was he?
corporations, well, he was 66 years old when he got
Lung cancer.
cancer.
Esophageal.
And so he lived for another 12 years.
Did he?
But it was after the treatment and everything, he was not the same
No,
man.
it's
He was,
terrible.
and he died at age 70.
So I can't understand why the AMA, American Medical Association, the American Cancer Association, isn't saying close down the reactors.
But the point is that
because they're cancer factories.
I just want to emphasize your point about the industries who are telling people that this stuff is not dangerous. It's the same thing as you said.
Tobacco.
That the tobacco industries did.
Yep.
Cigarettes.
It's exactly the same.
There was a time when they said
And
cigarettes were good
asbestos.
for you.
Yeah, they did. They
I know.
had doctors smoking,
I know.
advertising it.
So let's go to, it's Fright Night. Let's go to another scary story. One of your interviews in the book was with Maude Barlow, and she's a Canadian expert on planetary water issues. This water is something that most people take for granted. But it turns out that parts of the planet, significant parts of the planet, are in terrible shape when it comes to water. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, because of global warming, the glaciers are melting, and the Ganges is going to dry up, and the Yellow River and the Yangtze, they're going to dry up.
You say that with this little, demonic grin on your face. Alfred Hitchcock should be here.
I shouldn't do that. I don't know why I do that.
The Ganges is going to dry up.
Well, I do it thinking that if people understand that, they'll all, get solar panels on their roofs and windmills and stuff. I think that's my dynamic. I'll have to psychoanalyze myself.
Jimmy Carter had solar panels on
I
the
know,
White House.
and Ronald Reagan removed them.
And Barack Obama won't put them back.
Won't he?
Nope.
Well, no, that's right, he won't. I spent an hour and a quarter with Ronald Reagan holding his hand in the White House trying to teach him about nuclear weapons, and clinically his IQ is about 100. And I diagnosed that he had impending Alzheimer's, and he did. Did you know that?
Oh, did I know what? That you had spent this
I held
time
his
with
hand
him?
and...
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he got pretty upset and anxious. You know, when he got anxious, he got a red flush on his cheeks, and so I'd
think
have to
it's-
hold his hand and reassure him because he knew nothing about nuclear weapons or CIA or anything.
Don't get me started.
didn't. How did
Don't-
you elect
we
such a
don't have
man?
time to get me started on Ronald Reagan, please. Let's stay with water.
Water, yes.
China, I understand from this interview in your book, is creating a desert the size of Rhode Island every year. That Mexico City is sinking on itself because of water issues. And corporations are buying up a great deal of the
They're
water
privatising
supply.
water. How dare they? Privatising water. Soon we'll be walking around with oxygen bottles on our back. They'll privatise the air.
So what do we do about
Oh,
this?
these corporations are
How do
evil.
we begin to deal
Well,
with
you
the water
take on the
issues?
Supreme Court. Half of them should be in jail for Citizens United. They should be. I mean, I think Americans are too passive. It's hard to mobilise Americans. I tell them all this stuff, you know, and I say, you know, you spend $1 trillion on weapons a year and you don't have a free healthcare system. I mean, if someone took away our free healthcare system in Australia, there'd be a real revolution. There'd be blood in the streets, I tell you. Why are Americans so passive?
Actually, I
What
don't
is
know. I think that there is a, seriously, I think that there is a tendency in this country to take a fantastic view of serious issues. I don't know if this is a result of Hollywood and or television or whatever, but Americans fantasize a lot, and we sort of have the attitude
Live in fairyland.
that you know, oh, it's
Disneyland.
going to take care of itself, or it'll be all right, or these horrendous things that folks tell us are going to happen are not really going to happen, or they're not really going to be that bad. And then, you know, it's only when the crisis actually occurs that we do anything about it. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's in New Orleans or whether it was the financial meltdown in 67 and 68.
But think of the 80s when 80% of Americans rose up against nuclear weapons and we had 1 million people in Central Park. That was profound.
That requires leadership, and I think that's what's been lacking for a long time. We do need a citizens movement in this country. We do need.
But you need the cooperation of the media, because the media is determining
You
the
can do
earth.
it even without the cooperation of media. You could do it if you had the leadership and mobilized the people. If you remember, back in the early days of the civil rights movement, there was no media coverage, and the coverage that there was hostile.
Yes, it
but
was.
folks were committed to these issues, and they went for it. In the early days of the women's movement in this country,
That's true.
media was absolutely hostile. Women were ridiculed, and you know, people were bra burners, and you know, all this kind of stuff. And yet they prevailed because they stayed with it.
They did.
And there absolutely was no media support for the gay rights movement. And the gay rights movement which
Look
you
at
know,
what's happened in the election
started
now.
down here in the village,
I know.
and they would not stop. And now you have states legalizing gay marriage. If you're to, you know,
great,
Bob went
isn't
to
it?
parochial school in Montclair, New Jersey. If you had said something about gay marriage at Immaculate Conception, you know, the building might have fallen down.
Isn't it penetration without implantation is a sin? That's what they used to tell young girls at a Catholic school before they were even pubertal.
This is what I
What
mean.
were the priests doing? Penetration without implantation is a sin? Immaculate Conception? What's all this virgin stuff?
Final question I'm going to ask you about before we go to questions from the audience was something that you just brought up a couple of minutes ago, and that was you talked about the healthcare system in Australia.
Yeah.
So now Obama's been reelected.
Yeah.
So now we have you know, the Affordable Care Law. They call it Obamacare. Even Obama calls it Obamacare now. Critique Obamacare. Is it?
It's no good.
You've
You've still got all the insurance
that's
companies
what I'm
making money. There should be, look, doctors shouldn't make a lot of money. Our profession is a sacred profession. People tell us their innermost secrets They undress and bare their bodies to us. It's sacred. The most I ever earned in medicine was $25,000 when I was on the faculty at Harvard. They don't pay you very well there. If a patient can't afford to pay you, he or she will bring you a cake or a chicken, you know? It's obscene that these insurance companies are into medicine. Medicine isn't a business. It's like being a priest or a nun or a teacher.
So how does it work in Australia?
Well, what do you mean, how does it work? It's
what
nationalised.
happens? Talk a little bit about
It's like
what
your
happens
Pentagon,
if
it's nationalised.
If you're getting routine preventive type care.
Okay, I'll tell you.
And then what happens
I go to my
if
GP.
you have an illness?
I go to my GP, I pay my money, I go next door, and the Medicare office hands me the cash in hand that I paid my GP. My friend broke her kneecap in 8 places. She was taken by ambulance, put in St Vincent's Hospital, there for 8 days, best orthopaedic surgeon in Sydney, anaesthetic. She's American. Do you know how much it cost her? Nothing.
Well, I keep hearing from, these are my conservative friends now. Now I have conservative and liberal friends. My conservative friends tell me that, oh, if you're going to talk about England or Australia or Canada, all kinds of horror stories with the healthcare.
That comes from the insurance companies and the rhubarb they give you here, the propaganda. Don't believe your propaganda.
The truth is that we have in this country 2 forms of single-payer healthcare that work.
Free. I don't understand single payer.
Work really well. One is Medicare, which works really well. And then you have, it's not even single payer, but in the VA, the VA system in the military. And
why do you call it single payer? I don't understand that terminology. Why don't you just call it nationalised medicine?
Well, Medicare is nationalized medicine.
But what does single payer mean?
It means that
who's the payer?
The government is the taxpayer. Essentially, is the payer. We don't have a third party. We don't have an insurance company. You talked about doctors shouldn't make a lot of money.
They shouldn't.
Well, why should insurance companies make any money at all?
They shouldn't make any money at all.
Right.
And you see poor old ladies, you know, at a desk in the hospital, and they've got all these forms, and they don't know what to fill out and who to go to, and it's just a total morass, a disaster. And it's cruel.
All right. Anyway, thank you. I think that was great, but we are now going to take some time out and see if we have some questions.
Now it's your turn,
audience.
and ushers will go around with microphones, and you people online, if you have a question, then please type it in, and we'll get it to the 2 people on the stage. So I have a question, given that we just went through Sandy, and Bob, you live in Manhattan, and
Upper West
Helen,
Side.
you're a constant visitor to the United States. You were here for quite a while. So is Sandy going to make a difference? One, noticed you talked about the lack of any expression of concern or anything in the presidential campaign. The media are full of speculation about what's going to happen. Does Sandy make a difference? Do you think people
Bob
are
should take
actually
that.
going to
You're an American.
react as we all think they should?
I am going to take that then. I think Sandy is not going to make a difference. I think that it's going to be like all the other events. You know, Katrina didn't make a difference. I was on a television program. The days are running together this week. It must have been yesterday. And one of the questions, we were discussing the election, and one of the questions was, all right, who's going to be running in 2016, you know, and is it going to be Christie, and is it going to be Hillary, and you know, it's like, please, enough already.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to be faced with the fiscal cliff, and all the coverage is going to be about the fiscal cliff and Obama versus Boehner and that sort of thing, and what's going to happen with the Bush tax cuts. We are not going to get to a serious conversation, I don't think.
That's your media.
About global warming, climate change, and
That's
what to
almost
do
the
about
most discouraging
energy
thing I've heard this evening.
That's your media.
Now, I hope that I'm wrong. I honestly, you know, the fact that I say it does not mean that it's so, but that is my opinion.
Question?
Comment. I just want to say that we're not going to see it in the mainstream media. But there's right now Occupy Sandy. I sent them $10. All those people that were down at Wall Street that nobody's covering They have not gone away. They're in Rockaway, they're in New Jersey, they're in Breezy Point, and they're taking care of people and getting money. And don't give your money to the Red Cross. Give it to Occupy Sandy. Just go to the website. I don't think we'll ever be the same after this. Maybe in New Orleans we didn't pay attention, but this is New York. I mean, you don't screw around with New York. That's what
Please, there's a hand back there. Okay, oh, thank you.
I agree with everything you said except going after the Taliban after 9/11, but I truly am questioning this. I'm not making a stand. Why is it our responsibility? Why is America supposed to lead the world? We have the worst government going. It is incredibly corrupt, as you pointed out. Isn't your government better? Is England's government any better?
Yeah, our government's much better.
Well, then why is it our responsibility when we already have to fight all that stuff before
Because
we get anything done?
you have accepted the responsibility of being the most powerful country on earth. You've got military bases in every country of the world. You manipulate the politics in many countries of the world, including the Eastern Bloc countries after they left the Soviet Union. You're surrounding China with anti-missile bases as I speak. Although she's your biggest trading partner, she's your new Cold War enemy, because the Pentagon has to have enemies in order to steal your money to build the weapons and militarize space, which is what they're doing. Romney was going to start a new Cold War with Russia, but you've actually got anti-missile bases. You want to build one in Poland and Romania. You know, I don't know if you know what your country's actually up to in your name, because they don't tell you. And we see it from the outside, and you don't see it here, because you reckon everything's just hunky-dory, but it's not. And America's scary. And what's more, you export all your propaganda, your lousy ads, you know, about your rectums and your erectile dysfunction and, you know, whether your false teeth are sticking to the top of your mouth or, I mean, most obscene sort of ads you have now. Well, they're into our television. Do you know, I'll tell you an apocryphal story, and it was in Jerry Mander's book, Absence of the Sacred. There were some Eskimos, Inuits, and they had their normal life, and they dried their fish and plaited the leather and hunted the polar bears and lived in their igloos. And then they got electricity. And then they got television. And then the old women started praying for the people in Dallas. And then the young men and women left to go to a better life. And their life was destroyed. That's what I'm talking about, the power of your media. Now look at China. I was in China in 87 or 88. There wasn't a single car. There were millions of bicycles. There was one tall building in Beijing, which was the Great Wall building built by the Americans. There was nothing. And I said, I came home and wrote my book, If You Love This Planet. If China goes the way of America and they all get refrigerators and cars, we've had it. The Earth's doomed. And that's happened. So you export your culture, your coveting culture, to the rest of the world so that everyone will buy this rhubarb that no one needs on a finite planet. The resources are going to dry up. You can't keep making stuff like this all the time. And the way to fix the economy is we've got to, as George Bush said, fly and buy, fly and buy. We've got to stop buying stuff. But I don't see any hope because Wall Street is all about gambling. And the churches didn't like Wall Street years ago. They thought it was evil. And then they've sort of come over to think, well, it's okay to gamble. But they don't even gamble now because the computers make decisions within microseconds, millionths of a second. And the money's all over the world. I don't even see how the economy works. I don't understand it, let alone how it's going to continue in a finite planet as we're destroying the atmosphere, we're destroying the oceans, we're destroying the fish, we're destroying the forests, we're overpopulating to glory and everyone's arguing about abortion, for God's sake, when we've got too many people on the planet. Being gay is good, because that's good for overpopulation. No? The whole thing's madness. And the problem is most politicians are scientifically and medically illiterate, and they've got their hands behind their backs, taking the tips. We need someone with some guts to be the president and get in Congress and who understands. because science is now so complex. I can't even keep up with my own area in pediatrics of cystic fibrosis, let alone pediatrics, let alone the whole area. And then the scientists go and work for corporations, and their applied science is often used for evil, often for killing. We live with 80,000 chemicals in common use, most of which have not been tested for mutagenicity. I mean, what are we doing? We're so pathetic. And we're like pawns or puppets on strings, and we all watch the television. And when we watch television, our brainwaves go into alpha activity, so we sort of settle back. Power of critical thinking goes. It all goes through the neocortex into the midbrain and lodges there. You don't have time to think. And then you go out and buy the next thing you've seen on television, even though you might not like advertising. It's very clever. And Madison Avenue is full of psychologists working us to buy crap. And it is. And I've just walked along the streets and I've never seen so much rubbish. Rubbish. And I look at the rubbish and it's mostly packaging. It's mostly packaging and plastic. And there's an island in the middle of the Pacific twice the size of Texas made of plastic. And the albatrosses are feeding it to their baby birds, and then they get intestinal obstruction and die, and the fish are dying. And more plastic, not just one. You'd put it in 2 bags now in every shop I go into. Oh, do you want a bag? What are we doing? We're nuts. It's so obvious. And yet, I don't know, you answer it.
I wouldn't follow that on a bet. That was wonderful.
No, but
you answered the question.
Why are we nuts?
Well,
That's what I want to know.
I don't know why we're... Well, I think that Americans, who I think, as I said, live a lot of the time in a fantasy world,
Yeah.
I think most Americans want to be part of the most powerful country on the planet, that they want to be number one.
Yeah.
When you go to a football or a baseball
Yeah.
stadium, you'll hear the chant, USA,
Yeah.
USA,
They're
or we're
sick.
number one.
We have it in Australia,
But I
too.
don't think that most Americans understand the implications of that in what, and I agree with you that most Americans don't understand what's being carried out in their name.
No, they don't.
Right.
There's one
Somebody has
there. I
something?
want Elle to ask a question because I've known Elle since she was born. Elle. She calls me Hells, which is hell on wheels.
Best friends with her granddaughter.
She needs a mic.
As someone from the current generation, is there a way you suggest I can extend your message to my peers? I'm extremely concerned about the ignorance of our generation regarding nuclear power and the environment. For instance, I told someone today about what I was doing tonight, one of my friends. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Did you hear anything else I just said?
Yes.
No? Yeah, so I spoke to one of my friends today. I said, oh, I'm going to a meeting about nuclear power tonight. And she said, well, why? Why are you doing that? And I said, well, it's you know, a massive issue that we should all be concerned about. And she said, well, no, my dad's friend's a scientist, and he said it doesn't, you know, release any emissions. So it's not a problem about, you know, nothing to do with global warming, nothing, it's fine, nuclear power's fine. And that kind of mentality frightens me. And it's not the first time I've heard it. I think that's quite a widespread thought. And it's back to what you said, Bob, about, you know, people going, oh, it's all right, it doesn't matter, it doesn't concern me, all that stuff until the S hits the fan. Anyway, I was thinking maybe a powerful way to voice such concerns would be via social media. Perhaps start a Facebook page, or maybe, I know it sounds a bit contrived, but Twitter. I was reading an article about the effectiveness of Twitter the other day, and maybe we could do something like that, or I don't know, maybe Rach and I could start a revolution.
You and Rachel need to start a revolution. Rachel's my granddaughter.
Yeah.
They're both smart as hell, these two. And this one's a model. Am I allowed to say? She's a model. I knew when she was 2 she was going to be a model, and she is a model now, but she's also brilliant. Why don't you and Rachel lead a revolution?
Yeah, why not? But we need to, because our generation is totally, like, blissfully unaware, because it's the I generation, you know, it's all about me, it's all about consumption, which is a bit of
Okay, I'd like to point out there's a lot of hands, and I'd like to get as many people as possible
Yeah.
in.
But
so-
let
so
Bob-
if you
I
just-
think
If I
Bob
could just
should-
make one point on that is, I think that it's a great idea to try and use social media to spread the word on this sort of thing. But I also think that it's really important to have younger folks like you and Rachel sort of pushing these issues and enlightening your friends and others in your generation to the importance and to the profound implications of what we're talking about. So yeah, I just really encourage you to follow through.
Okay.
A woman has had a hand up at the back there for a long time.
Who has the mic?
That one.
Back there?
She seems like
Thank
she
you.
needs to ask the question.
Hi. I happen to be from Poland, but when I came to this country, I was actually allowed to teach science. And I taught science in high school for 11 years, and I was astounded what was taught actually to high school students. Actually, nuclear power is always portrayed as a green power.
Yes,
okay, this is one
industries,
thing.
schools.
I thought biology, right now it's called living environment. And it's surprising maybe to some, but we are spending much more time teaching children about genetic engineering and genetics, you know, in high school to 14, 15-year-old children than actually teaching about the environment as it is, although it's called living environment. So everything starts actually in school. Our school education has to be changed. I myself had an experience, my daughter had cancer. She had thyroid cancer. From that time on, I decided, no, I'm going to be an activist. I'm going to do something, to this country. So I've been actually working with a big poster and, stating that nuclear industry should be, taken down and it's wrong, etc. And some people would stop by and would tell me, what are you talking about? This is a green type of energy. So I'm just trying to say everything starts with children and in families. And a lot of parents are simply ignorant. Okay, so we teachers have some task to do.
Well, I know the nuclear industry goes into all the schools and teaches the children about nuclear power. That should be banned. Going and teaching them how to get cancer? This is wicked. Well, where are the people who will ban them?
Corporations should not be in
They
the
should
schools
not
on
be in
any
schools.
issue.
Will you write an article about it?
I don't write anymore. I'm not a columnist anymore. I've retired. 41 years on deadline is enough. I'll try and put it in the book.
Okay, we have a couple of, okay, great, thanks.
Hi. After Sandy, we saw how dependent we're of energy here in the city and in the world, basically. If any city would have had that situation, we would have seen how dependent our lifestyle is on energy. What are your thoughts about the lifestyle that we live? Do you think that we could keep on doing it with the renewable energy? What carbon footprint does the elements that we're pretending to implement to catch that renewable energy impact for real, And also, finally, there's many people have hope in nuclear fission. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, well, I've talked about nuclear fission. I'm not going to do that again. But the lifestyle, look, you go into a supermarket here, you get so freezing you nearly have to put on clothes because all the refrigerators are on. Think of the carbon footprint of the food you eat. You're eating raspberries grown in Brazil in the middle of winter. Things go all over. The food is transported all over. That's obscene. And all this frozen food is just obscene too. We shouldn't be freezing food. When I was a kid, there was no frozen food. We did all right. I mean, we don't examine how we live. We don't examine how we eat. We don't examine that we don't walk upstairs, we go up in a thing, and you go into the lavatory in an airport, you have global warming hand dryers, electric things. You move your hand in front of the paper dispenser, out it comes, it's a global warming paper dispenser, or a cancer-inducing paper dispenser. We don't think, and the doors that open in front of you all the time, global warming or cancer. That's how it's induced. Now, Americans, I stress, waste 28% of the electricity they use. So number one is conservation. And that's what I've just been referring to. But people are so goddamn unconscious because they're spoiled. Americans are spoiled. Even the poorest mostly have full tummies. And you can go to the skips. You can go to the skips behind the supermarkets. People live out of those skips because they throw out 40% of the food produced here is thrown away because it's by use-by date. But I use food that's got a use-by date months before. This is all ridiculous.
But you're not suggesting that the poor should have less food?
Of course not.
Oh, okay.
They should be paid for by the federal government. You should have no psychotics in the streets, no alcoholics, no mentally sick. They should be in the mental hospitals that Reagan emptied out, and these people should be treated with medical care. Drugs should be made legal, and it would get crime out of drugs. I mean, you know, the whole thing's insane. But in terms of energy, New York's one of the most energy efficient cities in the world, because you're all, you know, built up like this, and so it's easy to heat lots of people. But all your energy can be made from hydro, wind, solar, geothermal, cogeneration. Read carbon-free, nuclear-free, and then you won't ask me that question again.
Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more questions. Yes, sir?
I think it was in September, the NRC announced that it was going to sponsor a new study about the cancer risk around nuclear reactors. That's an update to a study that was done in 1990 by the National Cancer Institute. And there are a lot of people that have written about how that study was corrupt. What do you think the motivation is, since the NRC doesn't tell us the truth about anything, and particularly about the risk of exposure to the daily emissions from nuclear plants? What could be the motivation, the real motivation for another study?
Well, you know, if you don't want to do anything, do a study. But they don't have to, because Germany just did a classic study of children under the age of 5 living less than 5 kilometres from 16 reactors. Their incidence of leukemia was more than double normal, and they had a high incidence of solid cancers. That's a classic study, and that's because reactors continually emit tritium. You can't operate a reactor without tritium, which gets through your skin, into your lung, into your food that's grown, and it's a potent carcinogen. They also routinely emit xenon, krypton, and argon, all of which are potent carcinogens. They're fat-soluble. They deposit in your abdominal fat pad and upper thighs near your testicles and ovaries. They're high-energy gamma emitters like X-rays, so people are being mutated. Their genes and their eggs and sperm who live near reactors. That study was then duplicated by the French. And 80% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power. So they don't need to do another study.
Have there been serious studies in America of people living near nuclear
facilities? No. Oh, yeah.
facilities?
Well, Pilgrim, there's a high incidence of cancer around Pilgrim. A few, but very few in America. Don't do the study if you don't want to know, because people will have to be compensated. But this is very serious. And those 2 studies are classic studies. They don't need to do any more studies. QED, it's proven.
There has to be some motivation for the fact that they are doing it.
Yeah, they'll do a study
Okay.
and say there's no risk. Of course they will. They lie. The NRC lies. It's paid for by the nuclear industry. They now have a good chairman who I know. She's a geologist, but there are 5 members, and the other 4 are totally pro-nuclear, and they're nuts. I mean, I think that people who are pro-nuclear now are sociopaths. And someone asked me the other day, because of what's going to happen, someone said to me, you know, in Germany where they say, Daddy, what did you do during the war? Were you transporting the Jews to the gas ovens? Did you put them in? People are going to say, Daddy, did you help to build those reactors? And then what if there's a meltdown at Indian Point and you'll never get out of Manhattan? All the tunnels will be blocked, the bridges will be blocked, you'll be in your apartments with your windows closed. If the terrorists had gone into Indian Point and they had targeted Indian Point. They just didn't because they thought they were protected by anti-missiles or missiles, you would not be here. That would have been the end of the financial capital of the world. Do you understand what danger you're in with those reactors, those old reactors chugging away up there 35 miles from you? Do you understand? And if you did, you'll close them down because you'll never get out of New York. And there'll be millions of cancers.
There's a question over here. Yes.
Hi, this is a question about global warming. I've never really quite understood this. Suppose we did somehow, by some miracle, manage to put up all the windmills and the solar panels and stop eating raspberries and whatnot. Would that stop global warming? Would it slow it down? Do we need to stop it? What would it take to stop it? I don't
it would
really
take that.
That's a good
just
question.
stop
It would
eating
take
raspberries?
that, but it would take America leading, because I have to tell you, we all emulate you. It would take America doing it to lead, because we all emulate you, don't we all? And all your advertising comes into our country. I'm speaking as a foreigner now, an alien. So you need to do it. Don't rely on anyone else, and it will slow it down. But the CO2 already in the atmosphere is here for hundreds of years already. The permafrost is melting and contains billions of tons of CO2 and methane, which is 20 times more potent as a global warmer than CO2. So we are in terrible strife now. And it's like, you know, well, I've got this patient, they've got pancreatic carcinoma, it's metastasized, but they've got a boil on their nose. Now, I'll treat the boil on the nose. That's the sort of attitude now, using a medical analogy for the politicians who might even mention global warming now, when this city was devastated by this hurricane, and you could easily have had a meltdown. One of the reactors at Indian Point shut down. Oyster Creek was in serious trouble. They were cooling the cooling pools, because they didn't, the diesels weren't working, with fire hoses. It was like Fukushima. I don't think you understand the dangers you live in. And it's sort of like lemmings, sort of, well, I'm comfortable and I can't think and I've got to watch the television. And there's a ball game on. Oh! That's true. And then we haven't even talked about nuclear war, have we?
No, Alfred Hitchcock is here taking notes.
Where are the birds?
Scaring everybody.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Helen. Thank you so much. I've been directing an organization called Rainforest Relief for about 22 years, and one of the points I wanted to make is people talk about climate change, and they're always talking about fossil fuels, but you know, anywhere from 20 to 30% of global climate change gases are being emitted from deforestation. And you know, we worked to stop tropical hardwood use in the States for all the time we were operating, and stop more rainforest wood use in the US than anybody. But you know, it's a drop in the bucket. And talk about you know, passive Americans. It was selling this idea was extremely difficult, and we got very, very little support. I mean, right here in New York City, the single largest consumer of tropical hardwoods in North America. All the boardwalks, by the way, that got destroyed in Sandy were basically rainforest wood from Brazil,
really?
from the Amazon mostly, yeah. And you know, I don't know what I can do again to get them not to do it again. You know, we figured 12 miles of boardwalks in New York City, probably about 110,000 acres of rainforest were logged. Just the one round, and they were already on the third round of repairs with tropical hardwoods, and now here we are again. So, you know, I'd really would love to have folks like you and Bill McKibben and whatnot, please bring up, you know,
well, I often do.
Deforestation and tropical hardwoods.
The only thing that all nations agreed upon in Copenhagen, because that was a morass and I was there, was that we must leave the forests intact because the trees absorb CO2, put it in their wood and store it forever, and release oxygen that we can breathe. Now, think of how we use paper. Be honest. How many of you use blow your nose on trees? Come on. Tissues. How many of you use bloody tissues?
Don't admit to her that you
How
use
many
a
of
tissue.
you use paper serviettes? When you're in the plane, the hostess hands you a drink with a bloody bit of, you know, tree beside it. I don't need that paper serviette. How many use paper towels in the kitchen? Yeah, you're allowed to use paper to wipe your bottoms. That's all. You've got to stop using paper. How much tropical rainforest is being chopped down in the Amazon now? I went there a few years ago to see this incredible thing, to grow your beef, or soybeans to feed the beef. You know, well, I've written about it in If You Love This Planet, but the ramifications are vast. The one thing that can help to halt or slow global warming are the trees. We're chopping them down in Australia like there's no tomorrow.
Can I ask this gentleman a question? I grew up in New Jersey and hung out at the shore all the time, and the devastation, it's heartbreaking to me, and we see what's happened in New York. But what should we do about the boardwalks? Is there another method of building something, or should we not have the boardwalks?
Mentioned concrete behind me, and that's
Say it
that's
again?
a really, really bad idea. Concrete is a bad idea. It's
Yeah, it'll be washed away.
extremely carbon intensive,
Yeah,
number one.
concrete.
But number two, it doesn't last.
No.
You know, if we're going to build a boardwalk, which I think we really need to rethink the
Don't
idea
have
of a
one.
boardwalk
We
in
should
the first
rethink
place.
whether we
Yeah.
even
You
have a
know.
Yeah,
boardwalk.
that's
Is that
right.
right?
Right, but
It's
if we
anachronistic
absolutely
now.
are going to build a boardwalk, recycled plastic lumber, which is made from all the plastic
crap.
waste that we throw away.
Yeah.
If you're going to use plastic in this world, here's, you know, why do we take plastic that is going from the cow's udder to the trash in 3 weeks, and we make it out of the most durable material we've ever invented other than titanium, which we didn't invent, we just found. High-density polyethylene will last hundreds and hundreds of years floating in the ocean, but we make a milk jug out of it. Meanwhile, we make all our piers and docks and pilings and all this waterfront infrastructure out of softwoods. You know, and then we treat them with all these chemicals, and they last 7 to 10 years. And then we decide, oh, we'll make them out of old-growth tropical hardwoods, and they'll last 25 years. Recycled plastic lumber will last hundreds of years, and when it's done, we can take it and recycle it again. The understructure and the infrastructure, all these waterfront applications should be recycled plastic lumber. And if we absolutely have to have a wood deck, there are sustainable materials, sustainable woods, local materials, reclaimed and things like that, that if we insist on walking on a wooden deck, we can use.
Okay, I think we have time for one more
Atlantic
question.
City, Ocean City, all of these boardwalks were tropical hardwoods.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to see an interview or debate with Helen and Bill McKibben, and I was wondering if the new school would possibly put a shout out to provide a venue. Is it possible that we could see those two on a stage somewhere in the next
Well, we're working
so
on
many
getting
months?
Bill McKibben.
That would be
we certainly
wonderful.
are.
We want to see
We
them
are planning
together.
some kind of response. I wish I wanted to have a specific announcement for you tonight, but unfortunately I don't. But we will have a series of events. Last night, there was a very wonderful discussion among the students in the Lang Cafe about the response to Sandy, both in terms of helping out by volunteering, giving clothing, and also what it means for us in the future, how we can combat this kind of thing,
But
what
the
it means
two
for global
together,
warming.
I think
Excuse
the two
me?
of them, if they were together on a stage, Helen and Bill McKibben would be
Okay.
very wonderful.
It would be
In the
wonderful.
same
We just have to
time-
persuade them to do it.
Yeah,
And getting Bill here, we had Bill here
It'd be
last year.
fabulous.
Getting them both
two,
on
if
the
you could put a
stage would
shout
be
out
very,
for them
right. It would be terrific, and we will work on getting either them or somebody else.
Thank you.
We have to call it to a close. I see people are leaving. There are books here. I recommend it. It's a good read as well as it's important. I've actually read it, which is amazing. And I support them. I think they could be persuaded to sign a few books if you were to purchase them.
And Bob's in it too, so we'll both sign
Yes,
it.
no, they'll both sign it.
We'll both sign
So
the book.
join me in thanking our two
You're in it.
wonderful guests.
You're in it. That's
Thank
why
you so
you're
much.
here.
You're a great audience, terrific audience.